our communities in the longer term. And I think it's also really important for elected members to recognize the difficulties of these decisions and engage with that debate, because actually we're not in a position where we can fail to take decisive and sometimes quite difficult action. I mean, I'd simply cite, for example, the balance between service changes and council tax, albeit that's a debate that's perhaps slightly in abeyance given the council tax freeze. But actually, if we're either going to have to make substantial changes to services, including reductions in areas of service, or we're going to have to see substantial increase in council tax, or indeed an element of both. So whilst I appreciate that members find these challenges very difficult, and absolutely understandably, we need to get into a space as a council, officers and members working together, where we can thrash through that sort of difficulty and come to a view as a council about the actions we need to take. Because the greatest risk for us is delay, because if we delay, then we risk running into a financial cliff edge 2, 3, 4 years down the line, depending on the various decisions we take. So that's the challenge. I think everybody recognises that challenge. I think we've made some progress since the May 22 elections, and I really welcome that and thank members for their positive engagement around these challenges, but we've still got quite a way to go, because I think in truth, we're still in the foothills of what we need to do. There's a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. My final question, convener, and is relatively brief, is around the community engagement, and that's something that's very difficult for anybody to crack in local authorities, at community engagement and getting feedback, although we continually strive and have a new participation platform. But we did agree almost a year ago to have a PDP on community engagement to redevelop that strategy going forward. Can have an update of where that is in progress, because it's not started yet.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Yep. I'll try. Councillor Meikle-John's correct. There were 2 PDPs agreed, I think, this time last year. One was on sport and leisure and one was on community engagement. It was always understood that these wouldn't start immediately and that the sport and leisure PDP would be the first. We also, I think Council also agreed to set up a standing orders working group, and there was discussions and decisions taken that would be the first to meet. Then the sport and leisure PDP would meet, and then the community engagement PDP would start, just to allow sort of for members' time and for officers' time to try and sequence it. Sport and leisure PDP started last week, and the standing orders working group's on the verge of completing its work. So it's intended that the community engagement one, which is important and which does have to be started, will begin. I'd like to say in the near future. I can't say before Christmas, or that I can't give a definitive date, but I know that the new officer, Cameron Bell, has developed a plan for the PDP. So it's a case of getting all the players in place and having that meeting started, and work has been done in the background though, so it's not just going to start from a standing position.
If it was at all possible, I would like to see the scoping meeting be done before the end of the year, so that we're starting on that journey. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Yeah, I would support that as a position. I think we need to take action sooner rather than later, given the importance of consulting on the very important financial issues that Mr. Laurie has referred to. Councillor Spears, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Can I ask the Chief Executive, does that mean groups and politicians of all shades will be on strategy groups?
Thanks, Convener. In terms of the groups which are formed, and I suppose the obvious example is the Financial Strategy Group. I mean, that's been put together in line with the standing orders in terms of major groups and their participation. But all councillors certainly have a really important role. And I suppose one of the things we've done a lot in the last year and more, and you've been very actively involved in, as Councillor Spears, is a lot of briefings and discussions and explorations of the critical and challenging issues that the Council faces, and indeed there is a role for all members to be involved in that.
Well, can I say we have 5 independent members and still none of them are on the financial strategy group. You spoke very eloquently about the future finances of this council, and that should really incorporate all denominations that have been democratically elected. And as you well know, that is not happening.
I think that's just a point, and a point that you have made elsewhere as well, Councillor Spears. I think that's maybe a matter that could be taken up offline.
Well, sorry, it's not been taken up offline because, as you said, I've mentioned it on numerous occasions, and it does not appear to be taken up at all.
I think we will take it up offline, I think. Can I ask you, Mr. Lawrie, to do so, to have some discussions about that matter. And I think we have
your assurance on that.
That's a different assurance. Thank you, convener. Just under equality and poverty impact assessments on page 46, says, given the council is aware of the need to embed EPIAs into the decision making, can the director confirm what actions have been taken so far in terms of ensuring that there is a process for publishing all EPIAs? Thank you.
I think perhaps that should go to Kenneth first.
Thank you, convener. And members who sit on any or indeed all of the council's committees will have noticed a significant change in our approach to EPIA over the last year, so that it was clear, and this was a view we had as officers, that the position we were in was not satisfactory, that it was too patchy. And of course, the whole issue around about equality impact assessments is about consistency. And what we now have is a consistent approach being fed through the committee process, with the EPIAs being seen as either links in reports, or more commonly actually produced alongside the report, so members have that in front of them and visible when they're making decisions in committee. So I've said before, I think we've still got a journey to go on in terms of equalities and poverty impact assessments, but we have made quite a bit of progress, and it's our intention to continue to build on that to ensure that the process is robust.
Thank you for that. I can agree there has been progress made as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that there has been progress, but also that there's still room for improvement. Any other questions? Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. It was just a final question. The budget process, we clearly talk about reflecting the council's priority in that decision-making process. How do we ensure that that is communicated to the public and to all elected members, and that we're able to demonstrate that we're doing that in part of our decision-making process?
Sorry, I think for you, Amanda, yes.
Thank you, convener. Thanks, Councillor Meikle-John. So, well, now that we've sort of taken a financial strategy to council, so from a corporate finance point of view, we've got the financial strategy has gone to council. Now we're considering the accounts today, and then the next stage is to start to look particularly at our budget report. And so we've started to have a look at what's happening in other areas and look for examples of best practice where there's a much clearer linkage with priorities and decisions that members are being asked to take. I think we've flagged up in the best value report that's quite tricky, and we flagged it up in the financial strategy as well. It can be quite, it's much easier to do it when you're making investment. And unfortunately, the areas that we can make investment are limited, albeit we did demonstrate, I think, when we made the decisions on reserves as part of the 23-24 budget, that those were getting targeted at kind of key areas that we were that linked our priorities, for example, regeneration. So we're looking to see how we present that in a better way in terms of the budget report particularly, but also we have been working with the communications and marketing team to look at how we improve the information that goes out to the public on how, for example, we spend our council tax, how we target spend. We've got some initial drafts of that. So that is getting worked up to a sort of final draft over the next few weeks, at which point we'll be able to start doing some of the communications and consultation process on that. So it is something that we are actively working on to make sure that our budget report at the end of February shows a much clearer linkage with the priorities.
Okay, thank you. I think that does very much link into the issue of the community engagement, in the sense that one of the criticisms that was made was that the community engagement was too general, too late, and too narrow in format. So I think we really do need to move forward on the community engagement PDP, as well as, but I'm glad to hear that officers are also progressing the community engagement in relation to the budget, because that is going to be very, very important. Any other questions? If not, can we go back to the recommendations and just note the report and the action plan in response to the report?
Happy to agree.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that would move us on to agenda item number 6, the report to members and the Controller of Audit on the 2022-23 audit. And I think that would be yours, Amanda, yes?
Yes, thank you, convener. I don't intend to say too much because our colleagues from Audit Scotland are at the meeting today, and they'll be wanting to speak to the report. And obviously, a lot of the report covers some of the best value activity, and we've already had a discussion on that. So I won't speak to that. So just a really brief overview. The audit is complete. I'm happy to say that it was a smooth process for us this year. Our relationship with the auditors felt very positive and constructive, so I'd like to thank the auditors for making a transition year much easier. So the audit report is free from qualification, which is the kind of key thing that we're looking for during the audit of the accounts. You'll see paragraph 5.1.3 of the audit report on page 61 highlights the most significant issues that have arisen in the audit report. And I'll just touch briefly on the first bullet point, which is showing a fairly significant financial change in the accounts for pension disclosures. I think it's important to note that this is the first time that there's been this scenario for our pension funds, and the impact on the council's accounts was very unclear. The guidance came out after we had prepared the unaudited accounts, so an amendment has now been made. But what that is, maybe just important to make the point that doesn't impact the bottom line of the accounts, in the sense that it doesn't impact on the council's general fund balance. So it is more about a sort of technical accounting adjustment. And I think the other thing I would just note is that it's, it would be remiss of me not to highlight that the report does talk about financial sustainability and the risks around financial sustainability. So what I would hope is that the messages that members are receiving in the audit report reflect the messages that we as officers have been presenting to you throughout the financial year. The accounts are a huge endeavour. They are a massive piece of work for finance, and they involve all the services. There's a lot of information that services have to provide to finance. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank Danny Kearney and the accounting teams for all their work to produce the accounts, and also the work to prepare the papers that are required for audit and to liaise with audit in terms of any of the queries and getting the changes through the accounts. That is actually a really big piece of work and takes up a lot of the finance team's resource. I'd also like to thank the services who have a huge input, as I've said, and thank the auditors for a constructive approach to the audit process, which I think we've all found very helpful. And then finally, I would just note that the accounts will go to the December Council for final sign-off after consideration today. So I think that's probably all I was going to say at this point, but I believe the auditors will want to present their paper.
Thank you, Amanda. I'd like to just reiterate the thanks to all the staff, yourself and Danny and all the other staff throughout the council who have contributed to this very substantial piece of work. Pauline, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, convener. So I'm going to take you through our annual audit report.
Oh, could you start again, please? We didn't catch the start of what you were saying.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to take you through the second of our papers today, which is our annual audit report on the 22-23 audit. I'm going to do these in a slightly different order to how they are in your pack. So if you could perhaps turn to Appendix 2 of your pack, which is our covering letter. So this letter is addressed to this committee under ISA 260 as those charged with governance. Just give you a second to perhaps get those papers.
Page 115.
Okay, thank you. And as the Chief Finance Officer alluded to earlier, the most important thing to note in this letter is in paragraph 1, where we confirm that the audit work is now complete for 22-23 and subject to some final checks at our end on the revised accounts. We anticipate being able to provide an unqualified audit opinion on the accounts. You'll note there a slight mistake. We make reference to the 6th of November for the accounts being signed, which is obviously today's date, but it'll actually happen after the full council meeting on the 4th of December. So that's just a minor typo in the covering letter. ISA 260 requires me to report to this committee any significant findings that arise from our audit work, and I'll come onto those in a bit more detail. They are set out in detail in the annual audit report itself. I'm also required to report to you any unadjusted misstatements that arose from our work. So these are misstatements that are lower than our materiality level but exceed our reporting threshold of £250,000. So you see there that there's one unadjusted misstatement of £269,000. I'm also required to confirm from this committee that you're not aware of any instances of actual, suspected or alleged fraud. Any subsequent events after the date of the financial statement, so that's the 31st of March, any material non-compliance with laws and regulations, and anything that you think should be brought to my attention. I've not been advised of any matters to date, but just to pause there and confirm that there's nothing that members wish to bring to my attention at this point.
I'm not aware of anything. Is anyone else? No.
Good, thank you. So I'll continue. At Appendix A of this covering letter, you'll see a draft of the proposed independent auditor's report that I will sign after the council meeting in December, and it's already been put into the accounts that you have in front of you. You'll also see Appendix B, a draft letter of management representation prepared under ISA 580. So this letter you'll have seen in previous years. It's a standard letter that provides a number of assurances from management, and Amanda will sign that letter addressed to me at the same time that she signs the accounts in the start of December. Also included in this pack is Appendix 4, similar documentation regarding the Falkirk Temperance Trust. So again, the audit work on that audit is now complete, and after council meeting in December, those accounts will also be signed. I'm joined today by Gillian McCready, who is the appointed auditor for the Temperance Trust. And at the end of my presentation, if there's any questions on that particular audit, then she'll be happy to take those at that time. So moving on to the main report, which is our annual audit report for 22-23. So that's at the start, Appendix 1. So this report essentially summarises the findings of the work that we carried out as part of our audit this year. And you'll see at the key messages page, page 3 of the report, we again reiterate that we'll be providing unmodified independent auditors report on the accounts, and also for the charitable trust administered by the council. Underneath that, you'll see the key messages that we have in relation to best value and also the other 4 wider areas that are covered by the public sector audit model. So I won't go through them in too much detail. I'll take the paper as read, but just a couple of things to draw to your attention. So if you perhaps turn first of all to Appendix 2 of the report, that's about paragraph 19. As I mentioned in the covering letter, I'm required to bring to your attention any significant findings and key audit matters that arose from the audit of the financial statements. And you'll see there, as mentioned earlier, the main and really the only significant adjustment to the accounts is that in relation to the pension asset this year. And as has previously been mentioned, this is the first time since introduction of IAS 19 that this has occurred, where local government pension schemes across the sector have had a pension asset surplus this year as opposed to a deficit. So I think it's fair to say we were caught a bit off guard, both practitioners and the audit profession. Proper accounting practice under IAS 19 and IFRIC 14 has very specific requirements about how a pension asset can be recognised in the accounts. So essentially, and to put it simply, you can't recognise the full asset, which was £211 million. So accounting practice does not allow you to recognise that. Instead, we had to get engage with the actuary to get a revised calculation that essentially puts a cap on the amount that can be recognised, and as a result it was capped at nil, so no asset or no liability was recognised in the accounts. So we're content that has been correctly processed through the accounts, and as was mentioned before, it has no impact on the general fund reserve. It's essentially an accounting adjustment. Issue number 2, this was again a minor issue regarding the insourcing of the services provided by Falkirk Community Trust Limited and Falkirk Community Stadium Limited. When we looked at the notes and statements supporting the accounts, we noted that the prior year opening balance has been restated, but there are issues with the notes and the statements in the accounts that they didn't agree. So we're content that those have now been adjusted and there are no further issues. We also noted an issue with regard to depreciation charges. Again, this is a kind of technical accounting issue, and it was identified by officers themselves after they had provided us with the unaudited accounts, and they've taken steps to address that with Capita, who's a provider of the system, and that has been amended in the accounts, and we're content that the matter's been resolved. And finally, we had a point on our testing of asset disposals during the year. We selected a sample of 5. And out of the 5, we identified that 3 of them had already been disposed of in previous years, but just hadn't been processed through the accounts. And that processing was done this year as a result of the revaluation exercise. So you see there we've got a recommendation in, which appears in our appendix at the back of the report, where we just advise that management should ensure arrangements are in place that they can identify any disposals in a timely fashion. At paragraph 20, we identify 2 other matters that we identified from the audit of the annual accounts. That first one there in relation to pension costs, again, it's an accounting adjustment, and it's what I alluded to in the covering report. So that's an unadjusted statement of the accounts that management chose not to make. And because it's well below our materiality level, we're content with that. We also identified a disclosure error relating to incorrect classification of a lease. Again, that was not adjusted in the accounts. Oh, sorry, that was adjusted in the accounts. Apologies. So Appendix 3, Exhibit 3. Exhibit 3. This is the significant risk and material misstatement that we identified in our annual audit plan that came to committee earlier in this year. So we identify a risk and material misstatement due to fraud caused by management override of controls. Now, this is a standard under ISO 240. This is a standard risk that you'll see in all audits, all audit reports and all audit plans. In the middle column, we identify the various assurance procedures that the team carry out during the year, just to address that risk and to assure that there's no risk of material misstatement. And you'll see there in the final column that we include that there were no significant issues and nothing that required us to do any additional work or raised any concerns about management override. We also, in our annual audit plan, identified 2 key areas of audit focus, and those related to estimations in the valuation of land and buildings and pensions. And again, you'll see there that the work that we carried out didn't identify any issues over and above the pension issues already discussed. So there's nothing. What's my connection there?
Sorry, we seem to have lost
I think
Pauline there.
Just lost her connection. She's trying to get back in. If you give her a wee second.
Okay.
Gillian, I think you're back in, but you're on mute.
Gillian, we can't hear you. Oh, I can't hear Pauline either. Sorry, you're still mute. It would appear that you can't hear us. I think Amanda is about to try and make contact by other means because we are not hearing anything at all since Pauline kind of became...
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, but for the past few minutes we haven't heard anything.
It's okay. It's okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Apologies, we're having problems in the office with the connection. So I'll just continue. I've had to jump over onto a different laptop. So yes, the only bit I think we missed there was progress being made on prior year recommendations. So in the action plan at the back of the report, we identified that 7 of the prior year recommendations from your previous year's auditors, 4 are complete and 3 are in progress. But I've identified a recommendation where management should prepare some form of audit recommendation tracking report to bring to the audit committee for consideration. We note that you do that for internal audit, but we think it'd be good practice if you also included external audit recommendations and perhaps report on a six monthly basis or whatever the committee seems reasonable. So if we move on, the best value section, part 2 of the report. I won't go into this in too much detail because a lot of it was covered in the thematic paper. And you'll see there that we've replicated the 10 key findings at paragraph 30 that arose from the thematic work that we did. We also followed up some of the recommendations from your previous full best value assurance report that was brought to committee in January 2022. There were 9 recommendations from the previous auditor, and we've noted there that 3 are complete or substantively complete, 6 are in progress, and we are taking those forward as part of our thematic work, and we'll follow those up as part of our 2023-24 audit work. So if we move on to paragraph 74. We're required to report to this committee any issues or weaknesses with the systems of financial control. In previous years, we would have brought you a separate paper, an interim report that highlighted any issues with the work that we did on the financial systems. Instead, this year, we're taking a different approach and we're combining it with the annual audit report. So you see there that we had 4 minor weaknesses in some of the financial controls around about the systems that generate the financial statements. None of those are we consider to be significant. We adjusted our audit approach slightly just in terms of those bullet points in paragraph 75, for example, extending our sample testing and requesting year-end reconciliation, and that was just to address the minor weaknesses that we had identified as part of our interim work. At Appendix 1, you'll see that management have got a response into those weaknesses that we addressed. So finally, the last thing I wanted to mention was at the back of the report, the action plan. So there's quite a lot in this action plan. So it encompasses the 3 actions that I've already gone through that arose as part of our financial statements audit. It also covers the 8 recommendations that arose from the thematic report. And finally, it does a follow-up of the 21-22 prior year auditor recommendations. Again, 7 of those with 4 of them complete. Any outstanding actions in any of those sections will be followed up as part of our 23-24 audit. So that was all I was planning to say. Again, I'm joined by Gillian, who is still here, even though I don't know if you can see her. So we're happy to take any questions or comments on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and well done for overcoming your technical difficulties. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. It was just a very quick question, and it may be for Amanda. It's just the audit recommends that this committee should receive updates on all audit recommendations, and the agreed management action states that options have been explored around that. Just wondering what options are being explored, and could you explain how that might be able to come forward on an interim at a 6-monthly basis or something?
Can you address that, please, Amanda?
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. I think essentially the position we have is that we will be bringing the external audit recommendations back to audit committee. We are just trying to work out, I suppose, the mechanisms for that, how we pull that together, how we record that on our systems, and what report it potentially forms part of, because at the moment we get a separate audit progress report, which is Isabel's team, and she pulls that together, whereas obviously with the external audit recommendations, they can be across the council with lots of people feeding in. So it's just sort of trying to work out how we don't overcomplicate the processes we have. So it's really much more of a kind of operational, just figuring it out. But we have committed to bringing the recommendations back to the audit committee on a 6-monthly basis.
And that would include any further commentary about the progress where we've accepted the recommendations and looking to resolve, similar to the report that's here. Thank you.
So will that be coming to, at least as a plan, to the next audit committee, with an idea of how it's going to be addressed? Or is that too soon?
Well, I suppose what I'm thinking is that if we're bringing it on a 6-monthly basis, we would be due to sort of come back. Well, it would be around April time. So I was sort of thinking that would be the first time we would bring it back.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. If there are no other questions, we go back to the recommendations. I can find them. Here we are. Note the annual audit report. Note the action plan appended to the annual audit report. Consider and recommend to Council that the audited annual accounts of the Council to March 2023 are approved. Consider and recommend to the trustees that the Temperance Trust audited annual accounts of the Council to March 2023 are approved. We agree?
Happy to agree, convener.
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that report. We can then move on to agenda item number 7, the internal audit progress report. That would be Isabel, if you would like to address that one, please.
Thank you, convener. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on where we are with completing our 23-24 internal audit plan, as well as providing a 6-monthly update on the number of outstanding internal audit recommendations. Paragraph 4.1 sets out the details relating to the programme of work for 23-24. There are 23 assignment areas to be completed by the team during the year, and a summary of progress with each can be seen at Appendix 1. Paragraph 4.2 breaks down those assignments that lead to audit reports, but it doesn't include those reports issued to our other clients. Of the 15 audit reports, 3 have been finalised. Details on the scope and the findings of these 3 can be found at Appendix 2, with the assurance definitions at Appendix 3. Paragraph 4.2 also provides progress information in relation to the other 12 expected audit reports in 23-24, with paragraph 4.4 explaining that we are also undertaking audit work for Strathcarron Hospice at the moment. I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 4.5 regarding the number of current outstanding recommendations reported and logged on the Pintana system at the 25th of October. Appendix 4 provides the detail relating to each of these 13 outstanding actions. We've developed a new format for providing you with this information. It not only reports on the agreed implementation date, which has passed, but also provides you with an anticipated future date for completion so that progress can be further tracked by internal audit. As members know, on a quarterly basis, internal audit also identify what look like duplicate creditor payments. We then investigate those results to confirm if they're overpayments or not. The last quarter results from July to September can be seen at paragraph 4.6. I'd ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is that the team are making reasonable progress with completing the 23-24 internal audit work. I'd also like to thank everybody involved in bringing together specifically the progress updates for the report and the information relating to the outstanding recommendations. That is within the internal audit team, but also those within services who coordinated responses, updated Pintana, and of course the completion of the actions and updates on the reviews. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isabel, and thanks to all the officers who have contributed to this piece of work. Before I open up for questions, I just want to highlight that on page 258, there's an issue about the Legionella arrangements, but given that we have a much more detailed report on the agenda today on Legionella, if we could leave any questions on the Legionella issue to when we come on to the next item on the agenda, that would be useful. Any questions? Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. In section 4.2, we've got 23 assignments areas, and the team have used 15 council audit reports from those. Are we content that there's timescales associated with those and that we will be able to manage to do that on time?
Yes, what we try to do, sorry, when we look at the programme ahead for the year, we try to schedule in against what our resources are and where we can fit them in. So yes, we have a schedule in place, a timetable, if you like, for when all audits are completed. But as you're well aware, things change, resources are flexible, things just move around. So in turn, the internal audit plan needs to remain flexible. But we do have anticipate that we will obviously be undertaking all of those reviews. Of course, sometimes other work comes in throughout a year that has to take precedence depending on the priorities that we have at the time. So we have that schedule in place and we try to follow it as best we can.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. I've got another question, but it's in relation to the fleet management and monitoring arrangements. this has obviously been a very protracted process, and that we didn't have clear progress at the last committee, and hence the reason we were seeking further information. And I'm still a wee bit confused, and I'm still looking for a wee bit more information. It says that there are 4 outstanding recommendations, but also says that there's only 1 elsewhere in the report. So does that mean that the other 3 have been completed and there's still 1 outstanding? And when's that likely to be completed? So that we actually have the assurance that this is all going to be completely taken forward and conclude that particular piece of work.
Isabel, are you able to address that?
Yes, So the appendix that you're looking at all the information for fleet is around the summary of the report. So that was what we found at the time. And what we did find at the time was that there had been a lot of work undertaken with the fleet recommendations. They just weren't at the final stage of being able to say that they're closed and every action had been taken, but they were definitely in progress. So we did get to the point where, right, yes, we had 4 that were remaining outstanding, and there were dates given against those, and they weren't far away. So then if you move on to the Appendix 4, where you've given the update on the outstanding recommendations, yeah, you're completely right. 3 of them have been now completed and were undertaken as soon as the report was finalised. And yes, we only have that 1 audit, that 1 recommendation left that's to be updated, and you will see at Appendix 4 that it's the 30th of November 23 for that, and I've no reason to believe that would really slip, because the fleet manager has been really proactive in taking forward all of these recommendations to make sure that they could be closed properly.
Thank you. I just wonder if the director is able to give that assurance that that will be closed off by the end of the month.
Malcolm, are you able to do that?
Happy to give that assurance that we'll make sure that happens. I'd also like to say that there's been significant progress within fleet. You can see that there were 16 recommendations and we're now sat at 15. So I'd like to give credit to the manager and the team in general for the work they're doing. And I think the council's in a much stronger position with regard to that service than we were 18 months ago.
Thank you. My final question, convener, is page 257. It's in relation to transformation tracking, savings and transformation tracking, and the change fund, and being able to demonstrate that the change fund is being used appropriately and is actually creating the catalyst for the savings and service transformation that we want it to. I just wondered if there was a bit more about performance management of that.
I think that would probably be yourself, Amanda.
Thanks. So I might bring Danny in, who's on the call, and it's Danny that's been looking at this alongside Rebecca, actually. So we've been looking at how we improve the change fund spend and monitoring, and whether we need to restructure the ledger to help us assist us to do that. And we've been talking about that at the Council of the Future Board as well, in terms of how do we make sure that we're getting best use out of this funds and that we're clear what the funds are being spent on. So there has been some proposals about how we improve that, but I'll maybe bring Danny in if he could talk to that. Is that okay?
Okay, Danny, are you able to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's just in terms of us being able to collate the information easily and allow, in terms of revenue expenditure, it could go to a vast number of areas. So it's to give us that flexibility in terms of where we spend the money and being able to report it. So I have an idea on the way forward. So it's just us to implement that in due course, and we will do.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Can I just ask, in general terms, because I mean, it was a bit disappointing that it taken so long for some of these items to be addressed. And there are 13 now, 13 outstanding recommendations, which is quite a large number. In the update, they've all got timescales for completion. What will be the process for checking, and do we have the capacity to make sure that we do get these issues back on track, and that we're not coming back at a later date with a further question as to why it has taken so long? Are we in a position to give assurances on that, both in terms of capacity and the checking process? I'm not quite sure who the right person is to ask on that one. It's perhaps yourself, Kenneth, with the overview.
Those 2 points, really, the 2 issues you raised. One about the capacity to check things. And my view is that our internal audit team are very on top of this. I mean, I would say actually that 13 outstanding recommendations, it might feel like a significant number, but actually our rate of delivery against the number of recommendations that we have overall is very good. And what's important is our colleagues in internal audit are absolutely on top of that in terms of being able to say to senior managers across the organization, this is where you've not done what you said you were going to do. So I think that side of it is very robust. In terms of the recommendations themselves, and I mean, a number of them relate to children's services. And of course, we've had a period of quite considerable churn in children's services, which I think has probably impacted on our ability to ensure all of these things were delivered in time. But I think all of us, and I, both myself as chief executive, the senior managers, directors around the table, and our internal audit team, you know, the question's been asked about when these can be delivered. They are late. Dates have been given whereby we're assured that by these times matters will be delivered, and we'll continue to monitor that and ensure that they are. And if, in terms of any of the services, there's further issues in terms of meeting these dates, then I'd expect them to have that open discussion with internal audit colleagues about why that's the case, so that can then be factored into future monitoring and reporting to this committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any further questions? If not, can we go back to the recommendations? So we note the progress in terms of the internal audit plan, the number of outstanding recommendations, and the action taken on duplicate creditor payments. Okay. Thank you very much. That leaves us with one agenda item. Are people content to continue and go on to the final item, or does anyone feel they could do with a 5-minute break? Well, I'm not seeing anybody asking for a break, so we will go ahead on to agenda item number 8, the Legionella compliance update. And this, I think, may take some time, which is why I thought it would be a good idea to offer you a break first. But can I ask, is this, I take it this is going to be yourself, Paul, that's going to bring forward this report?
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to update Audit Committee on the actions undertaken following the internal audit report of June 2023, which identified there was no assurance in relation to the Council's approach to the management of Legionella, and this was reported to Audit Committee in September 2023. This report provides an update as requested by that committee and outlines the actions taken in response to the audit and those currently being progressed. By way of context, the findings of the audit report included inconsistent management arrangements, limited progress on remedial actions, poor escalation of results that were out with the normal parameters in respect of Legionella testing, and inconsistency of planned tasks by contractors. These findings were, in short, unacceptable. As members will be aware, the Council's approach to property, including compliance, involves a combination of various services managing assets with inconsistencies of approach and opportunities for miscommunication and a lack of clarity between services and responsibilities. This is changing, and the Council is committed to adopting a corporate landlord approach with the intention that this will be established from the 1st of April 2024. In advance of this new approach to the management of property, due to the concerns associated with property compliance that have been highlighted by the Legionella report, a number of key actions that will form part of that revised corporate approach are currently being progressed. This importantly includes the establishment of a corporate property compliance group with all services represented to oversee a coordinated and comprehensive approach. The creation of a property compliance team to ensure there is technical specialists and resources available to develop and implement a compliance framework with clear responsibilities. Staff have had workload currently reprioritised to undertake the initial actions of that team in advance of it being established. An immediate action that has been undertaken has been a logbook review, which is noted in the report to identify all the baseline across all properties held within the council estate, and specific improvement actions have been identified, and there will be support to premises managers in undertaking these. A summary of the recommendations and actions arising from the audit report, together with those required to establish an effective Legionella management regime as part of that wider property compliance framework, are included in the appendix. The actions are graded and prioritised as would be expected in an audit report with a relevant action plan. Key areas where progress has been made are Legionella risk assessments have been undertaken by a specialist contractor, and actions are being recorded and will be progressed. A new Legionella regime contract has been tendered, and this will commence in January 2024. This will bring together all testing, reactive and planned water quality works with a clear performance framework. In the meantime, existing contractors have had their scope of works extended to include remedial and planned works stemming from risk assessments to enable these to be actioned prior to the new contract being in place. Legionella training, a new framework for premises managers in relation to training is being developed with colleagues in health and safety, and this will be rolled out for all premises managers and those responsible for undertaking activities associated with Legionella. This training will be mandatory. Property compliance, as we would expect, has now been added to the corporate risk register, and this will ensure that it's regularly reported upon as part of the council's wider approach to risk management. And a final key action which is commenced is the establishment of that property compliance team to provide the technical and specialist support across the council, with recruitment commenced for a dedicated officer to manage water quality at Legionella, amongst other posts currently being advertised, and these will be incorporated within the council's new corporate landlord structure. The successful recruitment is critical to the success of implementing a comprehensive approach to Legionella and property compliance in general. The resources for the new compliance team and the specific Legionella water quality post are, as outlined in the report, being managed within existing budgets which are being reprioritised. At present, as I've noted, some staff workloads have been reprioritised to enable initial immediate actions to be progressed. In conclusion, the findings of the internal audit report in relation to Legionella, which reported a no assurance rating, have informed the basis of the action plan outlined in the report. This is being implemented and appropriate resources are being prioritised to make immediate progress. In addition, a range of wider property compliance improvement actions, such as the establishment of the corporate level working group, risk reporting and new contractor arrangements, are also being progressed, and these are again included within the action plan. With the establishment of a dedicated property compliance team and a revised approach to the management of corporate property assets, we can develop a comprehensive approach which incorporates performance management and improved communications, and importantly training to premises managers to ensure that the level of assurance associated with water quality and Legionella improves significantly. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kettrick, for the report. Moving on, sorry. So Councillor Spears has had his hand up for a wee while. So what do you have questions for Mr. Kettrick?
Yes, that's why I put my hand up. My question is, are we meeting our legal responsibilities at present? And I'll come back with 4 other questions.
Okay, I think that's obviously an important issue. Paul, are you able to answer that?
As identified in the audit report, there is a no assurance level being identified. Whilst there has been a lot of risk assessments being undertaken, there is actions that are outstanding. In relation to legal requirements, it is essential. The main legal requirement is we have a management regime in place for Legionella. There is gaps in that. Whether it would be constituted as a legal breach or not, I would leave for someone else to determine. I think the key thing that has been identified, though, is that going forward, we need a much more rigorous, comprehensive approach to ensure that there is no ambiguity about meeting those legal requirements.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spears.
Okay, thank you. So we cannot categorically say at present we are meeting our legal requirements. Now, question 1, it was decided at the September committee that we would provide a detailed progress. Now, progress on something that we should have been doing under statute legally means that we have not been carrying out our legal requirements. Is that correct?
I think
just to provide clarity, there was a number of actions identified within the audit report. It does not say that the council was not meeting its legal requirements. What it says is there was a number of areas for improvement that clearly demonstrate we are meeting our legal requirements in relation to health and safety. I think that one of the key issues that was clearly reported and is outlined in the action plan is that a lot of work was being undertaken but wasn't being recorded and followed up, and that was the biggest criticism of all the evidence that was provided, and I think that's something that the new regime will certainly see to rectify.
Thank you, Paul. Does that answer your question, Councillor Spears?
Well, not completely, but I take it that's the answer I'm going to get. My second question is on page 264, number 3, initial logbook review. Now, if you go on the internet, it quite clearly states that logbooks should be kept and updated. Different types of premises have to carry out testing at various times, but that is by statute. Does this say that we don't have up-to-date logbooks?
Can you answer that, Paul?
Convener, the logbook review is to identify where there is gaps. Every premises that's owned by the council has a logbook. It is required. What we have identified as part of the logbook review, or will identify as part of the logbook review, is where there is areas for improvement actions to be undertaken, whether that's where they're kept, their accessibility, and the level of information that's within them. At this stage, it would be too early to prejudge whether or not there is gaps in those that would constitute a major risk. But clearly, from the work that was done on the sample properties as part of the Legionella review, there was clearly deficiencies in those logbooks.
Thank you.
Okay. I know the forms can be downloaded for various premises from the internet. And that would maybe be worth looking at. Now,
Thank you for that. Thank you for that suggestion.
Question on page 265, number 5, detailed action plan. And you say you're just going to monitor progress. But for us to operate within statute, that needs to be in operation at the moment.
Convener, the detailed action plan is to ensure there is no ambiguity in respect of meeting our legal requirements, and the actions that have been identified within the report not only do that, but also ensure that we have as rigorous and as comprehensive approach to the management of Legionella and indeed to all property compliance matters.
Thank you. Do you have another question, Councillor Spears?
I do, on page 267 under 7.3, and you'll not be surprised I'm going to finish on this one, the legal. The implications of this report and its recommendations will ensure that the Council mitigates and protects against any legal action that could arise from any failures to safeguard the users of its properties. Now, we're not here to mitigate, we're here to locate if there is any Legionella outbreaks. And what we've clearly heard is that there is so many gaps and have been for many years. So I'll again go back to my original question. Are we meeting our legal responsibilities at present?
I think you've already asked that question and it has been answered, Councillor Spears. Do you have a further question in relation to this particular paragraph?
I don't.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. Now, Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, convener, and thanks to Paul for that update. That was helpful, getting that overview. I'm pleased to hear that the health and safety trainings will be mandatory. I think that's quite important so that that's understood. I just wanted to ask a wee bit about the Legionella officer and when they're likely to be appointed and what is their role in particular. And therefore, you know, I think we focus an awful lot on only having one person doing a job. Is there a resilience issue there with only that one person as well?
Mr. Kettrick.
Thank you, convener. The intention to have a dedicated officer within a wider property compliance team is to ensure that there is that resilience. However, their role is to basically develop the policies and procedures, but also to provide the technical expertise and to oversee the work of specialist contractors. We have specialist contractors who provide us with technical expertise, but who checks the checkers. That resilience aspect, which was highlighted in the recommendations, the audit report, overseeing contractor works and making sure that what was being done was being properly undertaken, was being recorded. What I would say is there was no suggestion that contractors weren't undertaking the work, it just wasn't being recorded and being progressed through, and understanding the technical competencies required to do that. Hence why we have chosen to go down the route of having a dedicated person. In relation to the recruitment process, it is advertised on My Job Scotland at the moment. If you want to go and see that, obviously it would depend on the success of the recruitment and the candidates we get forward in their notice period, if we are successful as to when they would be appointed. The intention is, we would hope, is certainly to have somebody in place by early in the new year, depending on their notice period. But if not, then we do have mitigation measures in place by using external contractors. But I would do feel that in terms of the importance of this role, it is proper that we have a dedicated officer internally to lead on that.
Thank you. The timescale for the completion of an implementation of the action plan is the end of the year. Do we think we're going to actually meet that?
I think in terms of the immediate actions and those high priority ones, I'm fairly confident the systems that we've put in place, we will achieve those. Would I say that we will 100%, we'll definitely do it? I wouldn't commit to that, but we will be trying all best endeavours to make sure we make progress. The position on Legionella and the approach that we have to water quality is unacceptable. I'm quite happy to say that. But huge advances are being made and will continue to be made to give us as best a framework so that we improve that level of assurance as quick as possible.
The action plan that's been provided doesn't actually have any timescales on it, Paul, and I just wondered, you know, if there was a reason for not having timescales and if those exist. If not, is it possible to have an action plan with timescales so that it can be monitored?
There are outlined timescales, but we intentionally didn't put them in purely on the reason that a lot of them are associated with the recruitment and the establishment of the team. We're currently relying on a number of officers working out with their current workload to do that on basically a goodwill basis, and there is that recruitment process. I'm happy to put timescales in, but there is a risk associated with that if we fail to recruit, and I wouldn't want to be a hostage to fortune that there would be something on that basis, but there is a number of timescales that are available. So members would want them to be briefed.
So I think that it would be possible for that to be brought back to the next committee.
Or provide it as a briefing to elected members.
I think I would rather.
Can I just suggest at that point that we actually maybe add into the recommendations that we note that the action plan does not include timescales for completion, and that we ask for an update to the February meeting which does set out timescales and progress to date. It seems to me that that would cover some of the issues here. I think while I understand the issue about recruitment, we cannot be seen to be in a position of not progressing this because we have a delay in recruitment. I think we need to be ensuring that we are progressing this matter. Can I put that forward as an addendum to the...
Yeah. On that, convener, I just wanted to ask about the compliance and whether or not the committee could then get a further update, perhaps 6 months, a year's time around the compliance once all of that has been developed.
Happy to provide a report on property compliance in general. Yeah.
I do have one final question, convener.
Certainly.
It is around the financial risks is highlighted in page 266, 261. And in order to do this work, other work has had to be reprioritised, or things may not happen. And I just wondered about what work that is and are there any risks associated with that? Is it likely to have a further impact?
So to provide assurance to members of the Audit Committee, we will continue to be undertaking health and safety works across the estate, and those of a nature that would be affect the operations of a delivery of a service. We'll continue to undertake those as priorities. The works that will not be undertaken, and it is a consequence of reprioritising resources, will those be of a lesser risk nature, where there may be delays in progressing those or even undertaking them in general, and that is as a consequence of the finite resources that we have at this stage. By recruiting and implementing the compliance team, that will allow some of that to be mitigated, because officers who are currently diverted onto this area of work will be able to go back to the day job and be able to progress those. However, as we develop a more comprehensive approach to compliance, we will discover a lot of actions to be undertaken at various levels of risk. Those will, as a consequence, coming from the Council's finite resource point of view, mean that less higher priority works will not be undertaken or will be delayed.
Okay, I appreciate that. And my other concern is the fact that you're saying in the paper that there may be limited buy-in from premises staff. Considering we've said that the health and safety training is going to be mandatory, that this is not an option. Why do we think that the premises staff won't be bought into this?
So the general approach historically is that premises managers do this as an addition to their day job, and this could across the whole range of professions, whether it's head teachers, office managers, even just senior responsible officers in buildings. It has been mitigated by those stronger reporting, the mandatory training. And there will be escalation to senior management team by both health and safety and the property compliance, the invest team to ensure that is part of the remit for people who are in those positions. However, we do just need to be aware that there has been resistance in the past to that approach, and that's why it's right to reflect it in the report.
And can I just follow up on what are we doing to address that?
So one of the big responses that we've had from those that have been apprehensive, let's say, about about the property compliance approach is the lack of training or understanding, or where do I get support? How do I do it? We don't expect them to be technically competent in the regime. We just need them to undertake the day-to-day actions. So that's why we're looking at implementing a training approach. The premises manager handbook has also been rewritten, and it's been written very much in a plain English approach to make sure there's a clear understanding. Everybody who now receives that has to sign that they've understood it. If they don't understand it, what don't you understand? And ad hoc training will be provided by the property compliance team or colleagues in health and safety and others as appropriate. But having that comprehensive and standardised approach means that we can share the learning and share the load in a lot of instances, but we have to do it. So any resistance has to be managed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. I think Mr. Benny had something you wanted to add to that.
I just wanted to reassure the council leader as well that the approach we take within place with regard to the risk section is to imagine what the risks might be as well. So I think it was actually myself that had suggested that as a potential risk, because whenever you introduce a new process anywhere, there's always the risk that people may be resistant to that because they like to do what has happened before. So while there will always be pockets of people who in the past have maybe been resistant, the risk is more about us thinking, what could the risk be and how are we going to mitigate it, rather than it being a statement of the fact of what we actually have right now.
Thank you. I think we all recognise the importance of this issue, and thank you for the admission that perhaps things have not been as they should have been in recent years, months. Very glad to see that there's action now being taken to bring forward a robust regime for mitigating and trying to avoid this risk, just so that we can be clear in terms of the recommendations we're putting forward. I did make a suggestion of an addendum, and so did Councillor Meikle-John. So what I'd like to do is ask Brian just to read out the recommendations with those additions before we make a decision.
Thank you, Convener. The recommendations in the report are to note the actions being undertaken in response to internal audit of Legionella recommendations, and to note the proposed establishment of a dedicated team and new comprehensive framework to manage property compliance as part of the Council's emerging corporate approach to property asset management. In addition to that, you asked or proposed that the committee also notes that the action plan does not include timescales for completion, and ask therefore for an update to the February meeting setting out timescales and progress to report. And in addition, Councillor Meikle-John suggested that the committee also ask for a further report in 6 months' time on the compliance to date. Is that?
Can I clarify, would that be 6 months from today or 6 months from the date of the February meeting?
I have to ask Councillor Meikle-John to clarify.
That's my question.
I would ask perhaps the officers to when it would be more appropriate to bring forward that compliance report, recognising that there's still work to do.
Comfortable either way.
Thank you.
Possibly I can put word and just ask for a further report. It will fall into the role and action log, so we'll get the report in February. There'll be a report, the role and action log, which will show there's an outstanding request for the report and compliance, and the director would put in that role and action log when he sees the report being ready. I see Councillor.
Mr. Benny.
With your indulgence, can I just say that it's 6 months from February, because I feel like we'll update audit in February, and I'd rather bring a report 6 months after that point that's kind of definitive, rather than one that's a kind of partial update on the one that you've heard in February.
Is that acceptable? Yes. So, Councillor Spears.
Yeah, thank you. Will that include full legal compliance?
Can that report in February include a commentary on legal compliance?
No, commentary that it will include we are acting in full legal compliance.
We can certainly provide commentary and reports in relation to legal compliance.
Thank you.
Convener, just before we finish, I think I don't want us to be going away today in this public session and feeling that the council's not been legally compliant, because on several occasions Mr Kettrick has said that we are legally compliant. So I just wouldn't want that to be misinterpreted.
I think that's absolutely the case. There's not a suggestion here that there is a lack of legal compliance with the ruling. I think Isabel would like to make a comment, or is that an accidental hand?
No, I was just going to add, just to provide some further assurance into next year, we agreed the last audit committee that there will be an internal audit report again in 24-25. So if there is going to be a compliance report from the service, the internal audit will sample test premises again. So that will give that additional assurance at that point as to where we are then.
Thank you, Isabel. That is very reassuring. Yeah. So with the addendums that we have, that Brian has read out, can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Happy to agree.
Thank you very much then. That takes us to the end of this agenda today. I'd like to say thank you very much to all the officers for all the work they have done today, and thank you to all the members who have attended and contributed to the meeting. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Convener.